transmission lines creates hundreds, not a couple, hundreds of local labor jobs in your community.
I understand that. And I talked to IBW about it, and I agree the benefit. There are benefits to short-term jobs. I understand that.
Quite frankly, transmission lines are a critical employer of our labor friends in your community as well, mainly your community. But answering the question about
where that power is coming from, that baseload generation.
Yeah, we know it's from your community with Perry State. So I'm looking for an answer to your question, but I mean, that's where the power is coming from. Is that we're closing anything down. This language is about moving towards.
You have dates to shut things down. It specifically shuts things down, correct?
No, it specifically does not. And again, that's why we have in this committee here to walk through the legislation.
So you're not going to shut Prairie State down by 2045?
Well, I'm not going to do anything. Okay. But
well, this bill is, that's what this bill does. It's your bill.
Yeah, the language specifically sets a target for 2035 for 45% carbon reduction. Okay. And that's 2035. Okay? And then 2045, the goal will be 100% or zero carbon emissions. So whether or not you're saying shut down, again, look what's going on across the country. You know, our president, President Biden, is doing a phenomenal job in working with our plants, many of them that are transitioning now privately anyway, to figure out a way to transition peacefully and justly. I think and
these plants are meeting and exceeding federal and state standards. So you brought up President Biden. This is the same, we're doing the same thing that he did with shutting down pipelines and domestic petroleum production, right? He shut it down, and then he went to OPEC and he said, hey, OPEC, please increase production so we can burn your oil over here in the United States. That's what we're doing in the state of Illinois. We're shutting down our production, and we're going to import coal-produced energy from Indiana and Kentucky. There has to be baseload generation. It has to be there. I understand, you understand this. When people walk into a room and they flip a light switch, they expect the light to turn on, right? So my ultimate concern is that this is an energy bill. It's not an energy plan whatsoever. It has no plan for the future. It just has consequences. So there's no plan to replace this energy generation in downstate. And who's going to be affected by that? But again, are your constituents going to be affected by that?
Yeah, but I totally disagree with you. We know if we do absolutely nothing, that coal is going away at some point.
I'm not asking you to do nothing. I'm all for clean energy. I'm all for all those things. I'm for making sure these nuclears can maintain their power base. I'm for all those things, but we have to be realistic. There has to be that baseload generation. It's frustrating that a lot of this stuff is happening in downstate, and basically this bill just runs right over top of us. It's extremely disappointing and frustrating. You and I have worked very well over the years, and we came in at the same time. We've been friends. We were able to work on a number of things, and it's just frustrating to see this just run right over top of us. We could easily pass something for the nukes, and to make sure that baseload generation is still there, and continue to work on this.
Again, we agree on the nukes. We want to do something for the coal transition. Doing nothing is 10 times worse than doing something. We're doing something. We're doing something that we can explain as sustainable. We're moving towards clean energy while preserving jobs. You know, we're talking about the same thing. And if your suggestion is doing nothing, I think that's doing a disservice. So
I feel like this is about perception and not about. So, I understand you put in a lot of hours, and I do appreciate it. I know you're trying to keep a lot of people happy, but this just really screws over my district. It's extremely frustrating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bourne.
Thank you. I have a few quick questions. My first one is very similar to Representative Davidsmeyer's. Have you spoken to anybody who is connected with the land that this transmission line will go through other than the Farm Bureau? sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah. I have not specifically talked to a landowner. I don't know that we generally do. I've talked to the Farm Bureau, and they've expressed the concerns about the transmission line. And again, I had a transmission line go through the southern part of my district in southern Cook County. So I mean, transmission line concerns, this is not a new issue. So I think you all are rehashing a transmission line argument that's nationwide. And
you're exactly
really,
right that it's not new. I mean, I brought a resolution to the General Assembly in 2015 about this transmission line. I've been talking to landowners in Christian, Montgomery, and Macoupin County about this specific issue since then. And so for this to get pushed at the last minute when they've been engaged for years on this specific issue, I think is very frustrating. I'm not opposed because of the Farm Bureau's opposition. I'm opposed because these are my neighbors and my constituents who've had 150-year family farms that this is impacting. A question about ethics and accountability. I think we heard some questions from Representative Ramirez about that earlier. Wanted to talk briefly. I only heard you mention ethics and accountability provisions as it relates to public utilities. Are there any other ethics and accountability provisions around who can invest, profit, or profit from these renewable energy investments in Illinois?
yeah, I know the focus of our ethics legislation was on our public utilities. I'm looking through specific language. Again, I believe there is, as they engage with our departments, particular standards that I can follow up with you, but the focus was our public utilities. I know clearly we had some concerns in the media, so we're just looking to address the obvious issue, but of course, with any business engagement with the state, ethics is important. So I think your question should, and I'm sure is already something that's addressed as they engage with DCO and the Power Agency and EPA. So maybe I can find some rules in the department, but ethics is already baked in as you contract with the state.
I appreciate with who can contract with the state, but I mean, we're talking about private companies who are installing, owning these green energy technology. And I'm interested to hear on the floor, or otherwise, if there are provisions in this bill. I remember when cannabis legalization went through the General Assembly, there were strong ethics provisions that members of the General Assembly, constitutional officers, et cetera, wouldn't be able to be involved. Something like that seems very important when the state is putting so many resources into this sector. My final question has to do with some of these programs that will be, let me find specifically. So I see like a displaced energy worker scholarship program, some of these other programs that are, I think, legitimately focused on communities who've had coal plant closures. My question is, what is the effective date of that? When would someone be able to qualify? A coal plant that closes after today, a coal plant that closed in the last 5 years, how all-encompassing are we with these programs?
Are you supporting this legislation so that we can make these things possible, or?
I just don't remember anyone being concerned about my constituents who lost a coal plant a couple of years ago and an outcry for legislation then to help them.
Yeah, well, again, that's why this is a new day. I think leadership of Speaker Welsh, working with our other chamber and working with the governor's office, we're trying to address the reality that exists now. I can follow back with you on the specific date. It's my understanding there'll be quick dates because we got to get a lot of these programs done. So whether or not it's specifically immediate for this section of this 1,000 pages, I don't want to misquote and you call me.
Right. I'm not asking the effective date of the bill. I'm asking who would qualify for these programs.
Yeah, well, again, there's into the language, there's specific specifically who it's focused on. So I mean, I can follow up with you, but it's my understanding it's going to be individuals who qualify based off of their circumstances. People who worked at a plant, there'll be different qualifications of various programs.
So I understand that, but I'm looking like specifically at this program. It says, I'm on page, I can direct you to the page, 126, 125. So it's a displaced energy worker dependent transition scholarship. It says that they have to be a dependent of a displaced worker who possesses all necessary entrance requirements for the school. So my question is, does it have to be a displaced energy worker that is because of this bill or because of, you know, the last decade of coal plants being closed down due to regulations?
Yeah. Again, just for focusing on the language, we all know after the language, there's administrative rules process and there's department's interpretation. So my understanding, looking at it, any displaced worker, whether it was a year ago, 2 years ago, that's what's clear on the language. But if you need some type of intent, I'm open to that. Or of course, fighting with you doing administrative rules process to ensure that that it's clear that it's not just, you know, moving forward, but anyone that's been displaced. So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, I appreciate your attempted answers. I think this proves that we need more time to vet something that is this long, that we don't even know what the plain text of the bill says, or if there are ethics provisions included or not. Very uncomfortable with this process, and obviously this all encompassing of a piece of legislation moving this quickly, but I appreciate your candor.
What's that?
It's the displaced, eligible displaced energy workers.
Hey, can I respond to that? I'm answering your questions.
Hold on a second. Was there a question or you want to reply to her statement? What,
Yeah, page 127, Representative Bourne. 120, 125. Page 125, line 17. I mean, definitions there, I've already made it clear that it says displaced worker. It doesn't say perspective to the passions of the legislation. But I clearly answered that question. I'm just not. I'm going to follow up with you on the ethics. So I answered both of those questions succinctly.
all right, thank you. You're concluded, Representative Bourne, I believe. That answered.
I am, thank you.
Representative Butler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, Representative Evans, I know we had representatives from labor testify earlier, but can you tell me, is all of labor on board with this legislation, or do we still have concerns with labor unions?
Again, this is another question that what is all of labor? You know, I think specifically, I guess, have you? It is my understanding that pipe fitters, at least two locals, 137 here in Springfield and the Metro East local, continue to be opposed to this legislation. So I just want to make sure that's on the record that even though we have this, it seems like all of labor is on board with this, that is not the case. Yeah, I respect each and every local throughout the state of Illinois. Speaker Welsh respects each and every local throughout the state of Illinois. And so all the people that worked on it, is each and every local in succinct? I'm not sure. So I think that's it's a very difficult question to answer, but thank you.
I get it. You might respect them all, but obviously you don't listen to them all. So I get it.
Are you concluded there, Representative Butler? Questions? If so, Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Marcus, thanks for your patience as we go through all of this. It's a large bill, a lot to get through. I got some questions about the RPS that came from some staff and experts here regarding how we hit these targets that are set here. I believe the targets are trying to get us to 40% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. Does that sound right to you?
Yes. Goals, yes.
All right, here's my concern. We said back in FIJA, I believe, a goal to get to 20% or 25% by 2025 and 16% by last year. You have only hit to 7% instead of 16. So we're far behind on that goal. Somehow the math works where we increase the RPS investment substantially, but we don't change the way that it functions enough. I guess I'm asking, does it change anything in here for how the RPS is laid out to actually get us to that goal in time? And I have a very specific question as to why how we're going to get to 20% by 2030. That's in 9 years. That's a huge jump from the 7% we were at last year. Help me understand how that's going to work.
Again, it's all about laying the foundation and the infrastructure to make things possible. Let's look through what we're doing here. Okay, larger utility scale projects, expanding the portfolio standards, getting more minority companies involved through the ECCs. We're establishing. I can read them all, but basically to answer the question, the infrastructure wasn't there. It was just the goal. FIJA. I had a lot of issues with FIJA because FIJA set out goals and plans, but not the infrastructure. I think this agreement is why you have so much support, because it's laying out how do we get to that point. Permitting somebody utilities to do more utility scale projects, strengthening the ICC for efficiency through government, creating incentives to build solar generation and energy storage. That's a big piece. FIJA really didn't focus on energy storage. Some of the failures in the state of California, why they're opening up some gas plants out in California, is due to lack of storage. So we're having incentives for energy storage. So I think for this bill is much better in laying out the foundation so that we can grow and reach those goals.
Well, I appreciate the fact that there's some items in here, but I mean, our technology for storage isn't there yet. We're hoping that it gets there with this bill. Well, we are going to jump from 7% to 40% in 9 years. I just don't see how that's going to happen. I want it to happen. I just don't see how we connect the dots. And my concern there, Marcus, has to do with the fact that by 2035, we're starting to turn things down. The bill says that all for-profit coal plants will be gone by 2030, correct? And they're going to happen anyway, I believe. But that's pretty much what we've got set in this bill. So we're going to have baseload deficit coming from that part of it. Now, the big issue in the room really has been Prairie State and CBOP for the last week or so. Is there a way we can get to an agreement on that?
We have an
agreement on what you said in this.
We have an agreement. The agreement is in front of you.
No, this isn't an agreement. I don't think that. Well, first of all, my localities that I represent, they're not behind this. They're behind what I believe the language that Hoffman's been working on. Are you? If that were to come with that, would we work on that or not?
And I have no idea.
Would you agree to that?
So you're referring to language that I'm not aware of. This is the language that I've been focused on. This is the language that has an agreement, that has thousands of supporters. This is the language that takes actual steps towards clean energy while protecting union jobs and quite frankly, creating more. So if your town has an opposition to creating more union jobs, diversity.
No, but Marcus, we have towns that invested in Prairie State. Okay. And if you're going to reduce Prairie State to 45% of its current, or down by 40, whatever the number is, by 2035, then they have a problem with that. Reduce emissions by 45% from existing emissions no later than January 1 of 2035. That's what's in this bill, correct?
Yeah, 14, what the years is, 2021, 14 years from now.
Right.
And again, let's keep in mind that for 10 years from now, we could potentially have major carbon sequestration equipment. We're talking about 14 years from now, which to some folks is too long to wait. But that was the agreement, and through the negotiation, given 14 years to reduce that 45%. It's my understanding that many of the profitability of the company during that time will be high between 2035 and 2040. We know that many of the contracts come off anyway in 2042, meaning those contracts end. And if you think about 14 years from now, all the stuff we talked about renewable standards will be increased. We could have storage. So again, when you're doing a bill like this, you don't know, and I don't know exactly in 2035, what will be needed. That will have to be determined. We're forecasting forward, and I think the agreement says that we've done a good job of that. And I want your support.
Marcus, but to use that same logic, we're guessing. We're putting a huge bill on the board here that's going to affect millions of people in this state. We're looking at, if we don't guess right, what's the result? The result is going to be that we're going to buy a ton of fossil-based power from our neighboring states because we won't have the capacity to do it ourselves. We're going to have peaker plants that are be offline. California's experiencing the same problem recently. They're putting theirs back online. There's a lot of guesses here. In an hour to discuss it, probably not enough to really be thoughtful about this, even though I know you and I have been in a room for hours and hours and hours together listening to testimony and trying to work things out. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that. But there's a lot in this bill that's changed since the last time you and I were in the same room together talking about energy. There's some stuff here we could change here and probably get a fair amount of bipartisan support, but I don't think that this is it. So I appreciate your efforts on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Evans, I got a question or two pertaining to the definition of electric vehicles in terms of the infrastructure planning and rebates.
So you got a
Also,
number,
what's that?
the page number, Chairman. I got a.
Yeah, page 197 through 215. And that's under the infrastructure planning part. And then page 945 through 948 on the rebates.
What's your concern? Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering, are electric, under the definition of electric vehicles, are motorcycles included under this? Electric motorcycles in terms of is my audio okay?
It's kind of in and out. You're asking our
Now,
motorcycles.
here's what I'm looking for. Is the definition for electric vehicles, is motorcycles included in that definition? The way it is written. In terms of
Yeah, I think that's an answer I can get.
it is something I could talk to you afterwards, because if it's not, I guess I wondered why. Was it unintentional? Was that left out?
Yeah, again,
Was that an unintended consequence on this? Because I guess it would make sense to include the electric motorcycles as regular electric vehicles. I mean, I guess that's what I was getting at. That's something we can talk about after, but if it's not, I would like to see maybe that included or some legislative intent that it was or something like that.
no, I commit to doing that. I think that's. It may be, it could be in another definition, so I'll identify that.
Thank you. Representative Wheeler, you have your hand raised still. I don't know. Did you have a follow-up question?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just forgot to take it down. Thank you.
I miss you here next to me. You're still here and said,
Likewise.
are you done? All right. Seeing no other questions from committee members. Representative Andrade moves that House Floor Amendment number 2 to Senate Bill 2408 be recommended for adoption. Assuming there's not leave.
There is not leave, correct.
Will the clerk take the roll call?
No leave.
Rita,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Wheeler,
No.
Andrade, Yes.
Bourne,
No.
Brady,
No.
Buckner,
Yes.
Butler,
No.
Carroll,
Yes.
Davidsmeyer,
No.
Evans,
Yes.
Gordon Booth,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes, and I do have your commitment, Leader Evans, that you will continue working on the issue with ASEA, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ramirez,
Yes, and I also echo Leader Hernandez and our continue to work with ASEA. Thank you.
Spain.
No.
That is 9 voting yes and 6 voting no.
Well, thank you, Chairman Reed. Thank you all.
Vote of 9 vote of 9 voting yes, no one voting no, no one voting present. Senate Bill 2408, House Floor Amendment number 2 is recommended for adoption. House Floor. And seeing no other business at this time, we're going to recess to the call of the chair.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.